Subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses. Subordinate clauses come in many different kinds, and they're quite common in English. So this video is just an introduction to subordinate clauses. I don't go into too much detail. First of all, let's have a look at this diagram. What we're going to do is just pretend for a moment that this blue line represents a clause, and so does this blue line. So we have two clauses, and within our sentence we want to join them. Now the grammatical item that joins them is the conjunction. So here we have a coordinating conjunction. That's a C, conjunction. All right. Now, as you can see, the two clauses are on the same level here. Over here, they're not on the same level, and this is a way to illustrate the idea of a subordinate clause. A subordinate means that it's of lower rank or value. So here we have our main clause and then our subordinate clause, and this is just a visual representation. It might not really represent the true situation, but here we can see that we have a subordinating conjunction. Our conjunction actually lowers the green clause. So you have your main clause and then a subordinate clause, and that is made subordinate by the subordinate conjunction. So we'll just write that down. Subordinate conjunction. A conjunction is a joiner, basically. So you should be quite familiar with them, particularly coordinating conjunctions like and but and or. So let's now look at an example of a sentence that uses a subordinate clause. So I like grasshoppers. This is your main clause, your main statement. We'll write that here, main clause. And then we have a subordinating conjunction, which is then directly followed with or followed by a subordinate clause. So you'll have your subordinate conjunction, and then whatever comes after that will be the subordinate clause. This is the nature of subordinate clauses, is that the subordinate part immediately follows the subordinate conjunction. Let's have a look at a list here. So we're going to look at coordinating conjunctions. So here, this is the coordinating conjunction here, and this is subordinate. So we are talking about subordinate conjunctions in this video, but just to show you what a coordinating conjunction looks like, because there are only a few of them. So we have and, but, or, we have nor, yet, and we also have for, and finally we have so. Now, so is the conjunction that I would like to look at in the next sentence, because here they're calling it a coordinating conjunction, as if we had something like this set up at the top. But we can actually see that this can function as a subordinating conjunction as well, as in this example. Grasshoppers are green. Now, over here I had they are green, or grasshoppers are green, as my subordinate clause, but here we're actually going to have that as the main clause. So let's just be clear about that, is that the one in blue is the main clause. This is my main statement. Grasshoppers are green. Now, because of this, as a result of them being green, I like them. So this particular conjunction is actually leading to a statement about a result. And for that reason, this is a subordinate clause, and this is a subordinate conjunction. So it's, in this case, it's not a coordinating conjunction. Now, just if we look above, it's interesting to see that that I like grasshoppers was the main clause here, and I like them is the subordinate clause here, and we've switched them over. The point being that your main clause is your main statement, and then this one is a product of that main statement, and here it's the result of that main statement, which means that this person, whoever made this statement, likes anything that's green. So grasshoppers are green, well, therefore I like them, or so I like them, because I like all green things. And now looking at types of subordinate clause. So here we go with a bit of a list. There are many types of subordinate clause. They're a main feature of English. So let's look at some now. I would study if I were you. Conditional. A conditional clause, which you may be familiar with using if. Next one. I don't care what you say. And in this case, we have a noun clause. So it's a noun clause because this whole piece functions essentially as a noun. The next one is I feel like vomiting whenever he sings. Adverbial clause. Saying that this is when I feel like vomiting, so it's telling us more about the verb. Batman is a superhero who doesn't have superpowers. This is a relative clause. And a slightly different one. Knowing it was bad for him, he poured the whiskey down the sink. And the it here is the whiskey. Knowing whiskey was bad for him, he poured it down the sink. And this is a, well, you can call this by two different names. You could call this a non-finite clause. And it's this green one that is the non-finite clause. Or you could also call it a participle clause. And the reason you could call it a participle clause is because the ing here is the participle. So ed or ing would be participles of know, and we're leading here with the ing. I'm not going to go into any detail about what constitutes a conditional, a noun, an adverbial clause, and so on, because that will be done in other videos. But it might be worth looking at the fact that we have the main clauses, the conjunction, and then the subordinate clause following, except in the case of the participle clause here, and it's a fairly common feature of participle clauses that the subordinate clause will actually lead the main clause, so showing that the position of the main clause and the subordinate clause is variable. Let's now look at our next point. So which comes first? I began to discuss that just a moment ago. Now let's look at a little more information. Usually you can reverse the main clause and the subordinate clause. So let's have a look at what I mean specifically by that. So I get good grades because I like school. Main clause, conjunction. Subordinate clause, because I like school, I get good grades. Leading with the conjunction, then the subordinate clause, then the main clause. So it didn't change the meaning at all. I get good grades because I like school, and because I like school, I get good grades, are exactly the same in meaning. However, if we had taken this green, just the green part and the blue part, and simply swapped them over, we would have changed the meaning. So that one would have then gone over here. So if I had written, because I get good grades, I like school, that is actually a different meaning, because this then becomes subordinate to this. So be aware that whatever's following the subordinate conjunction gets subordinated. And finally, there is the situation where some conjunctions can come after the main clause. So here you would have the main clause and then the conjunction following. Here it was optional with the conjunction because it's optional, but with this particular example, it's not. So when we use as if, so he ordered people around as if he were in charge. This is possible. This one in red, which I won't read, is not possible because here you have your main clause and as if needs to follow. And I can give you just a couple more examples of which ones will not go at the front, in front of the main clause, and that would be when you use as if, as we have in the example here. When we have so that, and when we have in order that. So all of these three, if used, would need to appear after the main clause. Okay, so that's it for our introduction to subordinate clauses.